how did you come like up with the program or like the idea for the signs?
Ah, um, I was watching the first Republican primary in 2015, and it was a number of candidates, and it felt like, except for maybe one or two, they all were saying, you should vote for us because we dislike black and brown people more than anyone else on the list. And I was just like, well, that's a pretty crappy platform. So I was reflecting on that, I was praying on that, and I had just started pastoring at Emmanuel in the summer of 2015, and said, how can we as a congregation seek to name what Jesus is calling us to as individuals and as a corporate body? And I took the idea to an adult Sunday school class, and they said, sure, let's do it. So someone in the church painted the sign, and we put it out on the front yard, and it sort of started snowballing from there.
So, I mean, you kind of answered like how it works, but how did you like gain, how did this spread?
Well, that's a good point. I don't know if you saw it out there, but the black and white one is the original one. And then I shared that idea with a group of local Mennonite ministers, and they said, well, that sounds like a really neat thing. Could we do that as Anabaptist churches as the political season was starting? It was now, getting into spring 2016, the election was coming up, and Mennonites have had a long history of seeking to live nonviolently, and often not voting, even not participating in politics that way. So the idea was, could we provide yard signs that often are, red for a Republican candidate or blue for a Democratic candidate, but that are different colors and that are sending a different message. So not necessarily vote for this candidate, but how do we love our neighbors as Jesus called us to? So the local Mennonite churches paid to have those handed out for free at churches. If people wanted them, they could have them, didn't have to pay for them. And then this church, we sold them as a fundraiser at the Virginia Mennonite Relief Sale, which happens every fall, and all the donations go to Mennonite Central Committee. So that fall, our church sold 1,700 signs, and at that point then a website was created where people could download the PDF for free and either make their own sign or go to a print shop and have it professionally made. So from the fall of 2016 until about, 3-4 months ago, we knew there's well over 100,000 signs across the country. But we can't keep track. Like at this point, that number is old, but so we don't really know. So people spreading the word themselves, different Mennonite churches, and different communities wanting to make this statement for the betterment of their neighbors and their community.
I thought it was really interesting because I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I'd seen these signs. A lot of some of my friends had them at home.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen them around, and I thought it was interesting that they were from here.
Yep, and they're from Harrisonburg.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. And from the beginning, what I'd hoped it would mean for the congregation and the community, English, Arabic, and Spanish are the three languages most commonly spoken in this neighborhood. I would think almost half of our congregation speaks Spanish and English. I speak Arabic, so wanting to connect with neighbors here, so it's on both sides. So it's so that people in the neighborhood see it as they walk or drive by, and it's on the backside so that when we come and leave church, we see it. And we're reminded this is who we are trying to be.
Why do you think Americans are so hostile towards refugees?
I think I would proffer a question back to both of you first. How have you seen Americans hostile to refugees?
People have given refugees stereotypes, like they're gonna come over and take our jobs. But like the way I think about it, I'm like, well, if they're willing to work harder and do all that stuff, go ahead. Like, why would you want someone who won't work as hard to like have a job? But like they're not, like they're here to like, because there's more economic like things to do, and if they're like in trouble, like if there's like a war going on, why would they want to stay there and have like possibly die when they can come here and live under like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Because we like the U.S. like America is like it's known for like their freedom. So like, of course, people want to come to the U.S.
I kind of think that there's a lot of the like us versus them ideology, and I think that's kind of come from a lot of the politicians who've been like up there, and they kind of like make it seem as though like people are coming from other countries and stealing our jobs. But we talked about it like in some of my other classes that that's not really the case. Like generally speaking, the people that come from other countries aren't taking the jobs that like college graduates and like the general population would be having anyway.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's just kind of like the mentality that people have, but I'm not necessarily sure where that came from.
So why are people hostile? I think the United States is this interesting mix of other than indigenous folks and folks who were forced to come here. Like, for instance, slaves, people who were enslaved. Everyone has immigrated. Now, there are folks who are refugees here because of war or economic conflict, absolutely. But we're at some level a country full of immigrants that is still at times very concerned about who gets to come and join, some historians have said, the grand experiment that is the United States. I think some people have chosen not to be hostile to welcome folks who are coming because perhaps they have been welcomed or because they feel a moral or religious sense to do so. I think often when we respond with hostility to someone, whether it's an immigrant or a family member or a neighbor, it's often because there's a wound that we have that we're reacting out of. So I think I would ask, hey, what's up, Chris? Where is the hostility coming from, and why is it there? Our current president has described folks who come from other countries in certain very derogatory ways. Statistically, that is not accurate, and I don't think that actually speaks to the wound that some people might be feeling that causes fear, that causes hostility, that causes anger. I think for me as a pastor, as a Christian, one of the ways of following Jesus means to seek to love even our enemies. So taking a very opposite course to extending hostility towards folks, whether we know them or we don't, whether they've wronged them or they haven't, and in this case, no, they have not wronged me. But I think one of the realities that you name of hostility, last month was the first month that not a single refugee was resettled in the United States in 30 years. So it's not just, in the last 5 years, the last 10 years. In 30 years, last month was the first month that not a single refugee was resettled, which is terrifying.
Wow.
So have you seen, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but have you seen these signs make a difference in the attitudes of the community?
I think yes, I have seen it. I get to hear lots of really powerful stories of connection that happen, of people hosting folks in their homes, going and learning, notes of appreciation for people walking by. I think the two stories that I like to tell the most is that a story from the city of, or are you looking for this community particularly? I can tell.
In general,
yeah.
Either way.
I often ride my bike around, and I was doing a pastoral visit a few years ago, and I was on Country Club Court Road, over that way a little bit, and there's a nasty railroad crossing, and they have this nice sort of a roundabout, like that you can go and hit it at a 90-degree angle. Well, I was like, I'm strong, I can just go across it. Well, I went across it, but I went head over heels, like off my bike, onto the ground. Thankfully, it was December, so I had a heavy coat, I had mittens, but my coat was ripped, my mittens were ripped, I was bleeding, my knees were bleeding, and I staggered to my feet, and cars just kept going. They didn't stop. And so I'm like, oh, this is a very biblical, Good Samaritan image, if you're familiar with the biblical story. If you're not, don't worry about it. But I stand up, and right across the street is one of the signs. I'm like, whoa, this is the first time that I've been bleeding, injured on the side of the road, and seeing one of these signs. And it was outside the local mosque. The Harrisonburg Mosque is right there. And I have relationships with people at the mosque. I've been to the mosque. So I was like, oh, this is the first time where I have felt like I can go to a place. Now, I could have gone to this place anyways, but because the sign is there, it is saying, if you're injured, you can ask for help here. And I hope that is the message it has sent to folks who have been bleeding or have been alone or have been struggling financially or feeling isolated because of language or, new to the community or country. So that's the story the only one that I've been bleeding that is involved with the sign. It's the only one.